Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. You're watching World Today. Before we begin, here are today's top stories. Bangladesh's new government and members of parliament will be sworn in tomorrow. President Muhammad Shahabuddin will administer the oath of office to the new Prime Minister and his cabinet colleagues. China has confirmed that Canadian and British citizens will be able to visit the country visa-free from tomorrow. The policy will be in effect until 31st December this year. U.S. Secretary of State emphasized America's commitment to working with European allies as equal partners. He discussed with Slovak Prime Minister about strengthening bilateral ties and regional cooperation. The Palestinian presidency has warned of the serious consequences of Israel's decision to declare lands in the occupied West Bank as state property. It described the move as a flagrant violation of international law. More than 20,000 sick and wounded Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are waiting to travel abroad for treatment. Although Israel announced the reopening of Rafah crossing, the number of people allowed to travel remains limited. Iran is pursuing a nuclear agreement with the U.S. that delivers economic benefits for both sides. Common interest in the oil and gas fields, joint fields, mining investments, and even aircraft purchases are included in the negotiations. Australia will spend 3.9 billion Australian dollars to progress construction of a shipyard that will help deliver nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS Defence Pact. Almost 10,000 jobs will be created due to the project. Arsenal powered into the FA Cup fifth round for the first time in 6 years as the quadruple chasers crushed Wigan 4-0. They rooted the third-tier struggles with 4 goals in the first 27 minutes of the match. And that's today's top news in a quick snapshot. Up next, the complete World Today Bulletin. Stay tuned.
Bersihkan penapis penghawa dingin dan tetapkan 24 darjah Celsius untuk lebih jimat.
Bangladesh's new government and members of parliament will be sworn in tomorrow. President Muhammad Shahabuddin will administer the oath of office to the new Prime Minister and his cabinet colleagues at the Jatiya Sangsad National Parliament. Now, the newly elected members of parliament will take their oaths in the morning, followed by the swearing-in of the new ministers later in the day. A number of foreign dignitaries are expected to attend the ceremony. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, headed by Tariq Rahman, scored a landslide victory in the 13th parliamentary elections held last Thursday.
Our journey in a situation marked by fragile economy, left behind by the authoritarian regime, weakened constitution, and statutory institution, and a destroying, deterring law and order situation.
Tariq, the son of former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia and former President Zaur Rahman, returned to Bangladesh from Britain in December after 17 years in exile. Tariq has described his party's election victory as a turning point for Bangladesh. China confirmed that Canadian and British citizens will be able to visit the country visa-free from tomorrow, after the two countries' leaders had announced such agreements following official trips to Beijing. British and Canadian Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Mark Carney both visited Beijing in January, seeking to bolster relations with China. Both leaders had hailed progress following meetings with top Chinese leaders such as President Xi Jinping, including on issues like visa-free access for their citizens to China. Beijing's foreign ministry confirmed these agreements, saying Canadian and British citizens will be able to travel to China visa-free, with the policy in effect until 31st December. Holders of ordinary passports from these countries can enter China without a visa for business, tourism, visiting relatives and friends, exchanges or transit for a period not exceeding 30 days. Delegates to the African Union Heads of State Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, had welcomed China's announcement of zero tariffs on African imports beginning 1st May. The Ugandan Foreign Affairs official who attended the summit that opened on Saturday hailed the increase in trade opportunities between both sides.
This is the most exciting announcement that Africa could receive at this particular time when we're at the AU. You will be aware that the United States of America removed AGOA, which was something which was a cornerstone of Africa's export to the United States of America. But this is more than replacement of AGOA. And I think this will increase the trade and opportunities of commerce between Uganda, Africa, and China.
In a congratulatory message from Chinese President Xi Jinping to the 39th African Union Summit, the president said China will fully implement zero-tariff treatment to 53 African countries that have diplomatic relations with China. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Slovak Prime Minister Roberto Fico in Bratislava to discuss strategic bilateral ties and regional cooperation. The two leaders addressed nuclear energy partnerships, military cooperation, and regional security concerns during their joint press conference. Rubio also emphasized America's commitment to working with European allies as equal partners.
We don't want Europe to be dependent. Now, we're not asking Europe to be a vassal of the United States. We want to be your partner. We want to work with Europe. We want to work with our allies. We want to work in cooperation with you. And our point has been and continues to be, the stronger you are, both on an individual basis in terms of countries and collectively as an alliance.
Meanwhile, the Slovak leader announced Slovakia is hoping to sign agreements with U.S. firm Westinghouse in the coming year to lead consortium to build a new nuclear plant. Fico also discussed military cooperation, noting Slovakia's purchase of F-16 aircraft from the U.S. and interest in increasing the number of 18 planes. Japanese economic growth fell short of market expectations in late 2025. This adds pressure on Prime Minister Sanae Takaishi to stimulate economic activity following her recent elections landslide. Gross domestic product GDP in the world's fourth biggest economy expanded by just 0.1% in the fourth quarter, undershooting market forecasts of growth of 0.4%. Growth in private consumption and private residential and corporate investments contributed to the expansion. On an annualized basis, the GDP expanded by 0.2% in the 3 months through December, significantly weaker than the median economist's estimate of 1.6% growth. Now, according to economists, the weak growth is, however, not expected to deter the Bank of Japan from hiking interest rates later this year. A man in his 20s was arrested after 3 teenagers were stabbed in Osaka's tourist Minami district around midnight on Sunday, leaving one of them dead. Now, the victim who died was a 17-year-old boy. 2 other 17-year-old boys were also taken to a hospital after the incident. One of them was in critical condition and unconscious, while the other was also seriously injured. About 10 hours after the suspect fled the scene, police arrested 21-year-old Ryoga Iwasaki over the stabbings. A security guard who was inside the building at the time reported hearing a thud followed by screaming. When the guard looked at the entrance of the building, he saw a young man clutching his abdomen and chasing someone. Now, the security guard followed and found a man collapsed and unconscious by a nearby bridge. Bloodstains marked the path from the building to where he had collapsed. At least 2 people were killed when an avalanche struck a mountain valley near Colmayer in northern Italy. The Alpine Rescue Service said a 3rd person had been hospitalized in critical conditions. Now, according to the rescue team, the victims are French nationals. 15 rescuers from the Alpine Rescue Service, or Ulster Valley, and official police took part in the operation. In addition to them, 2 doctors, 3 units of search dogs, 2 helicopters and 2 ambulances were deployed to the site. The avalanche hit a stretch of the Canal del Vese, known for steep passages, popular for off-piste skiers, west of Courmayeur in the vital Veni area of the foot of the Mont Blanc. Still ahead, Palestine slams Israel's West Bank land policy. The Palestinian presidency has warned of the serious consequences of the Israeli government's decision allowing it to declare lands in the occupied West Bank as state property. It described the move as a grave escalation and a flagrant violation of international law. Now, the presidency said the decision to classify West Bank land as state land under Israeli authority constitutes a direct threat to security and stability. It stressed that the measure amounts to de facto annexation of occupied Palestinian territory. It signals the beginning of the implementation of annexation plans aimed at entrenching the occupation through illegal settlement expansion. The presidency also said the step effectively nullifies signed agreements and clearly contradicts resolutions of the United Nations Security Council. The unilateral measure will not grant the Israeli occupation any legitimacy over the land of the State of Palestine. It will also not alter the legal and historical status that the West Bank is part of occupied Palestinian territories under international law. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency reported that Israeli strikes killed at least 12 people. Despite a U.S.-brokered truce that entered its second phase last month, violence has continued in the Palestinian territory. Now, the Civil Defense Agency said one strike hit a tent of displaced people in northern Gaza and another targeted an area in the south. At least 5 people were killed and several injured were in an airstrike targeted a tent sheltering displaced people in Jabalia in the north. 5 more were killed and several injured in a separate strike in the southern city of Khan Yunis. The agency said at least 1 more person was killed in Israeli shelling in Gaza City, where Israeli gunfire killed 1 person in Beit Jahila in North Gaza. Hamas spokesperson Hamez Qasim accused the Israeli military of violating the ceasefire. He stressed that the targeting of displaced people in their tents is a serious violation of the agreement. Gaza's health ministry said at least 601 people have been killed since the truce began. More than 20,000 sick and wounded Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are waiting to travel abroad for treatment as Israel continues to operate the Rafah crossing border with Egypt under tight restrictions. Now, Gaza's health ministry said it is closely monitoring the continued partial and constrained operation of the crossing amid worsening health conditions. It said more than 20,000 patients and wounded people are registered on travel lists, including critically ill cancer, heart and kidney failure patients. Many of the injured require advanced surgical procedures unavailable inside Gaza due to the blockade and repeated targeting of the healthcare system. Although Israel announced the reopening of the crossing, the number of people allowed to travel remains limited and disproportionate to scale of the health catastrophe. Now, the ministry said it had also received harrowing testimony from patients who managed to leave for treatment abroad, reporting unjustified complications imposed by Israel. It warned that continuing the restricted mechanism at Rafah threatens the lives of thousands of patients and deepens the humanitarian crisis. The U.S. is still not clear on how it sees the future role of the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency. Its chief warned that destroying it would create a vacuum similar to Iraq after 2003. Washington had long been UNRWA's largest donor, but halted funding in January 2024.
The key issue is the US. My understanding is that there is no definitive answer because the interest of the US is also to be successful in this process. And if you get rid of an agency like ours before you have an alternative, you are also creating a huge vacuum.
UNRWA was fashioned for decades as the main international agency providing for the welfare of millions of Palestinian descendants of those who were driven from homes during the war. Lazzarini, who will leave his post at the end of March, said the agency does not foresee any more cuts in the immediate term. It continues to offer public health and education services that no one else is relying or providing. Now, Iran is pursuing a nuclear agreement with the U.S. that delivers economic benefits for both sides. This matter was conveyed by an Iranian diplomat days before a second round of talks between Tehran and Washington. Now, Iran and the U.S. renewed negotiations earlier this month to tackle their decades-long dispute over Tehran's nuclear program and avert a new military confrontation. The U.S. has dispatched a second aircraft carrier to the region and is preparing for a possibility of a sustained military campaign if the talks do not succeed. Common interests in the oil and gas fields, joint fields, mining investments, and even aircraft purchases are included in the negotiations. A U.S. delegation, including envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, would meet Iranian officials in Geneva on Tuesday. Russia's army chief Valery Gerasimov visited Moscow's troops in Ukraine and said the Kremlin's forces seized a dozen eastern villages in February. Gerasimov said in 2 weeks of February, despite severe winter conditions, combined forces and military units of the Joint Task Force seized 12 settlements. The pace of Moscow's advance picked up in autumn, but Russia has not reached its goal to seize the Donetsk region in 4 years of war. Russia demands that Kyiv withdraw from the Donetsk region for any deal to end the conflict, terms unacceptable to Ukraine. Gerasimov said Moscow's troops are moving in the direction of Sloviansk, an industrial hub which has been under frequent Russian attack. He also said Russia is expanding the security zone in border areas in the northeastern Sumy and Kharkiv region, where it controls pockets of territory. The army chief also said he would discuss with officers about further actions in the Dnipropetrovsk direction. Now, Australia will spend $3.9 billion Australian dollars to progress construction of a shipyard that will help deliver nuclear-powered submarines under the trilateral AUKUS Defence Pact with the US and Britain. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the investment is a down payment for the new shipyard in Osborne, a suburb of Adelaide in South Australia.
We'll see almost 10,000 jobs created to design and build the yard and to build nuclear-powered submarines in South Australia. My government will contribute as a down payment $3.9 billion for this project, making an enormous difference. We know that the estimation is that there'll be $30 billion invested here in Adelaide, in South Australia.
Announced in 2021, AUKUS is Australia's largest ever defence investment. It will see US-commanded Virginia-class submarines based in Australia from 2027. Several Virginia submarines sold to Australia from around 2030, and Britain and Australia building a new class of AUKUS nuclear-powered submarine. Up next in sports, Arsenal crush Wigan to reach FA Cup 5th round.
Menggosok baju sekaligus boleh menjimatkan elektrik.
Arsenal powered into the FA Cup fifth round for the first time in 6 years as the quadruple chasers crushed Wigan 4-0. Mikel Arteta's side routed the third-tier strugglers with 4 goals in the first 27 minutes of the fourth round tie at the Emirates Stadium. Arsenal defender Riccardo Calafiori was injured in the pre-match warm-up, forcing Arteta to bring Bukayo Saka back in the line-up instead of resting the England winger. Despite the late reshuffle, it took just 11 minutes for Arsenal to go in front. Eberezik Eze cleverly turned into a space for a superb pass to Noni Madueke, who raced into the Wigan area and finished with aplomb. Eze, signed from Crystal Palace last year, provided another assist in the 18th minute. He guided a pinpoint pass to Gabriel Martinelli, and the Brazilian stroked a cool finish into the far corner for 12 yards. Now, Arsenal's third goal arrived in the 23rd minute when Wigan defender Jack Hunt headed Saka's cross into his own net. Arteta's men showed no mercy as Christian Norgarad's pass sent Gabriel Jesus clean through a delicate chip over Wigan keeper Sam Tickle in the 27th minute. Now the Gunners are back in the last 16 for the first time since they won the FA Cup in 2020, a success that remains the only major trophy of Arteta's reign. And that wraps up Worlds Today. Tune in to Malaysia Tonight coming up at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. I'm Otto Othman. Salam Malaysia Madani and have a great day ahead.